Today's video is the next in my series of using the iPad in Procreate to draw animals as letters of the alphabet. Today we're going to be drawing an owl for the letter O. Just like all my videos, it's in real time so you can follow along every single step of the way. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Starting out, I'm using a 4000 by 4000 pixel 300 dpi canvas. It's an RGB canvas. For my brushes today, I'm going to be using my creator set for Procreate, which is available on Gumroad. Links down in the description below. I'm going to use my Brainstorm sketch brush to begin with, then we'll switch over to the smooth inker. And last but not least, for my color palette, once again, I've got this pre-made so you can download the exact same colors that I'm using in today's video. If you go to my website, bjdell.com, underneath the YouTube reference materials page, you can find that. The link's down in the description below too. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, like I said, using that Brainstorm sketch brush. And for the O for owl, we want to go ahead and do this symmetrically. So we're going to set up our canvas first. So I'm going to come up here to my actions menu and we're going to go over to canvas. We're going to turn on drawing guide. And you'll see once we do that, we've got this grid layout, which is not what we want. So we want to edit drawing guide. Then we want to select symmetry. You'll see we've got this vertical line now. So anything we draw on one side of the vertical line is going to show up on the opposite side. Saves us time, cuts our drawing time in half. So we'll hit done there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my O in here. So let's go ahead and go up to add text, O, double tap to highlight it, tap on our font to change, and let's go to Arial. All right, there we go. And then I can just extend this, make it bigger, a little bit more. And there we go. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to tap on this, hold down, drag it underneath layer 1. That's going to be our sketch layer. Hit N for blend mode and drop our opacity down to about 10%. We want to be able to see it. We just don't want it to be too dark. And there we go. All right. So now with layer 1, we've got that drawing assist turned on. We're just going to go ahead and kind of follow around our O here, holding down to lock it in. You'll see we've got kind of a double line there, which is okay. We don't really have to worry too much about that. We can have the double line and kind of work around it. Now I do want this to be a little bit different than this shape. So we're going to go ahead and grab the arrow here and using warp, we're just going to kind of pull up the top a little bit, pull down the bottom. So we got a little bit more of kind of like an egg O shape. And then from here, honestly, we're done with the letters. So we can turn that off and then just use our layer 1 assist. All right. So next up, let's go ahead and kind of work on where the eyes are going to go and the face. So I'm going to start to kind of bring up a curve line here, back down, and back in towards the center here. It's almost kind of like an upside down V here into a W at the bottom. All right, so now that we've got that, let's go ahead and draw oval for the eyes here. Another oval here in the center for the pupils. Fill those in. I'm going to draw some tapered lines here for underneath the eyes. Some bags there. Then we'll draw a V here. Connect that at the top. And draw kind of a U shape here at the bottom for the bottom of the beak. Next up, we'll bring in some eyebrows here. So I'm going to bring in a curve line that kind of tapers at the edge there. Kind of pull that back in. Do another curve line that comes back down into our shape there. All right, let's give them a chin here at the bottom. So we'll do a curve line. Kind of a squiggly there, which we'll fix here in a little bit. And then for the belly, we'll bring a curve line here, kind of a U shape, connecting there at the bottom. And then just curve that down, kind of following that same curve of the chin there for the belly. All right, for the wings, let's go ahead and keep the wings kind of butted up here against the outside shape. So we'll just pull a curve line here. Then just do a couple more, getting smaller as they come in towards the center. All right, finally here at the bottom, let's go ahead and add in some more curves just for the feet. And I want these inside the shape, so I don't want these coming outside. We want to kind of keep that O shape as we go around, and I think that looks pretty good. So there we go. Super easy, super quick sketch. I think O for owl is going to be one of the easiest ones that we have, so I think that looks good. We've got the sketch done. It's loose, it's rough, but that's okay because we're ready to move on to the inks phase. So let's do that next. We're going to come up here to the layers menu. I'm going to make a new layer on top of this one. And then I'm going to tap the N for blend mode and drop the opacity of layer 1 down to about 30%. Once again, we want to be able to see it. We just don't want it to be too dark. And with that done then, I'm going to switch my brush over to my smooth inker. I'm going to drop the size of this down to the 7% here. And then I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to, you'll see, I'm not going to turn on the drawing assist here. When you make a new layer, that drawing assist, the symmetry is not turned on by default. You have to physically tap this and turn it on again for each new layer. But you saw that double line that we got with the outside. I don't want that for the inks. So I'm going to do this first and get this in here before we draw this. So holding down to lock it into the shape. And you can see it's not lined up here. So I'm going to grab my arrow here and I'm going to choose uniform and just drag this over, and you'll see it's centered there once those orange lines pop up. So I want that there in the center. And then from here, I'm going to grab warp. I'm going to move this so we can see everything. And I'm just going to kind of pull out the shape just a little bit so it lines up better with that original shape that we had. So make sure it matches up fairly well here, just because that is going to affect once we start drawing in everything else here. We want to make sure that everything lines up once we turn that symmetry on. Okay, so we've got our basic shape for our owl. I'm going to come up here now and make a new layer. And then we are going to turn on symmetry here. So we want to turn on drawing assist, and symmetry will be turned on now. All right. Still using that smooth inker here. Let's go ahead and kind of zoom in so we can see a little bit better. And then we're going to go ahead and pull this line down and around. And you'll see I've got some overlap here, but I can just use my eraser. If I hold down my eraser, it's going to switch my eraser to that exact brush that I'm using. And then we can kind of erase that overlap where those meet up in the center. Now this is where you might want to zoom in really, really tight here so you can make sure that you've got those totally lined up. If you're zoomed out further, you might miss some of the sections. It's going to look like it's lined up, but it's not. You'll have a little bit of a wonky edge there. All right, back to my brush then. We'll go ahead and pull these lines down towards the center. And once again, we can overlap, or you can try to stop it. I prefer to overlap and then zoom in and then erase. So those now match up really, really nice. Pulling this one up, we'll come in from the center and pull up and out, just like that. Pulling in a tapered line down towards the center here, and then matching these up here. Now you'll see here we have an overlap from the outside of our shape, but that's okay because we're on a separate layer now. We can come back to our layers menu, come back to our body shape, and using the eraser, we can erase that overlap. So now you'll see those are removed and we don't have to worry about overlapping those and erasing if we were all on the same layer. And that's one of the benefits of using the separate layers like that. Okay. Let's go back to our drawing assisted layer. Once again, this is where everything is going to match up from left to right. So let's go ahead and draw some ovals in here for the eyes. Another oval in the center for the pupils. And we want these pretty big with them being owls. We'll drag and drop in there. Now for this curve line here, you're going to see I'm going to twist my canvas. And I'm going to start with a thin light pressure here to give a taper, getting heavier as I come around, and then lighter pressure at the end of the stroke. So I've got a tapered line there. If you don't like the taper too, you can go up to the eraser and just kind of pull back a little bit on that taper to make it a little bit more what you're going for. I'm going to pull another tapered line here around the bottom, so we kind of got that bag of the eye there underneath. Once again, using the eraser to kind of thin out that taper. Get a little bit too long or don't like it exactly, you can just do that to pull it out. Okay, back to the brush here. Let's go ahead and zoom in here so we can see our feathers as those come down around. You'll see I started that curve using that body as my guide so that everything lines up and it looks natural as it comes into that line. And using the eraser to kind of thin those out just a tad bit. Okay, moving down to the feet here. And you'll see here too, not following those to the T. I've talked about this to death before, but honestly, I think it's great when you just kind of use the sketch as a guide. You don't follow those lines exactly because you start to look a little bit too mechanical with your strokes. I like to keep it loose, and that's one of the best ways to do that is just to use those as a guide, not try to trace per se. All right, getting this line coming down around, and I want that to kind of flow into that bottom curve. I don't want it to look separate, so that's key there to make sure that those line up. And then this, I'm going to do a little bit different here. I'm going to come back into the body layer because matching up a curve like this is really difficult when you have symmetry turned on. It's going to get really, really wonky there at that center part where those meet up. So by doing it like this, I can then go back in, I can erase to where these overlap, match everything up, and then I can go back to the drawing assist layer and just kind of pull the ends out there. So that looks a lot more natural with that curve coming around. Same thing here in the center. We're going to go back to that body layer and this curve here, and same thing here for this little chin part. If I did that with the symmetry turned on, it's going to look really crazy and it's going to double that, so that doesn't look good, and we don't want that. You'll see here too, I've got a little bit of an overlap on the feather here, the wing, just because since this wasn't using the symmetry, it's going to be off just a little bit. So what we can do is we can come back to that layer and just kind of pull this back. We want to make sure though it doesn't remove too much of this side of it and leave a gap, which it doesn't, so we kind of lucked out there. All right, with that done then, let's go ahead and go back to our brush, and we can go ahead and use, let's not use the symmetry layer for the beak. Let's go ahead and come down to the body layer again. We can do the beak kind of by hand here, so we're gonna come down here and then back up for the V, connecting these together at the top, kind of holding down to lock that in. We can pull in the bottom of the beak here, holding down once again to lock it in. And pulling back, you can see what we're left with. Okay, last but not least, I want to give some highlights here to the eyes. And I didn't do that initially because since we're on symmetry, it would mirror the highlights and it wouldn't fall the way that highlights would. They would be on the wrong side on one of the eyes. So with that being said, let's go ahead and make a new layer on top of everything else. Let's come up here to our color palette. And actually, I don't have white in here, but that's okay because we can just hold down in the background here to select white. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to make an oval here. I'm going to drag and drop, and then a smaller one down here, drag and drop. Now I could come over here and do the exact same thing, or if I want these to be the exact same size, the exact same shape, I can come back up here to my layers menu. I can slide this to the left and I can duplicate it. Then using my arrow here and either freeform or uniform selected, I can just go ahead and drag this over, and you'll see those blue lines that show up, those let me know that I'm lined up from left to right. Then I can let go, and you'll see now that we've got those. They're not symmetrical. They fall the way that they're supposed to with the light source. Okay. So let's go ahead from here, back up to our layers menu. Let's turn off our sketch layer. And then I'm just going to pinch together all of the lines layers. So now we have our outline. Our inks are done. If we want to add in some extra kind of details here, we can, going back to black and on that line, on the outlines. I'd probably pull in some kind of tapered curves here just for some extra details. And this, I'm not doing symmetry because I don't want these to look mechanical and exactly the same from left to right. So doing those separate, it's going to make that look a little bit more natural. We can also come down here, and for this I am going to turn symmetry back on. So if I tap here and turn on drawing assist, we can come in and maybe add some feathers here on the belly, just so we've got a little bit more going on in here. Just varying different sizes. Once again, light press at the beginning, harder press as I come through, and a lighter press at the end to give that taper. And then we've got some feathers on the belly, and I think that looks good. So there we go. Our design is done as far as inks go. So now we're ready to add in the color flats. So let's work on that next. To do the color flats, we're going to come up here to the layers menu. I'm going to tap on layer 3. I'm going to set that as reference. So this is going to allow us to drag and drop colors into our new layer down here, which we'll make. It's going to be underneath here. We'll go up to our color palette, choose the brown here. This is going to be the base color for the owl. We'll hit continue filling here at the top, and then we'll just tap inside the areas that we want filled in. Coming back up to our color palette then, let's switch over to this kind of cream color. We'll use that for the face here and for the belly. Back up again, darker brown. Let's go ahead and use that. Actually, let's do that. Do the darker brown for those eyebrows, and we can use that for the feet and the beak. Then finally, back to the color palette for the yellow for the eyes. And there we go. You can see really quick, that gets done super fast. The color flats don't take any time at all. From here then, we're ready to move on and start to add the shadows and the highlights. All right, so to do the shadows, we're going to come up here to the layers menu. We're going to make a new layer on top of layer 4. We're going to tap this, and we're going to set this as clipping mask. So what this is going to do is going to allow us to color in on this layer 5. It's only going to show up on the parts that are colored in on layer 4. It's not going to go outside here in the background. It's only going to show up on those colored parts. With that done then, back up to our colors palette. I've got this kind of midnight blue color here. We'll use that. And then we're going to come up here, smooth inker. We still want that. Streamline is turned on. That is good. We're ready to start coloring in. So the way that I've got the highlights set up on the eyes, we've got the bigger circle here on the left. So our light source is coming in here from that top left corner. So that means our shadows are going to be on the bottom and on this right-hand side. Now that we've got that decided, we can come in here and kind of start to bring in some of our shadows around here, just kind of following those curves that I laid out initially. If you overlap here, you can just go ahead and erase. The other thing I want to do too is I want to come up to my layers menu and I want to turn off reference on layer 3, because as I start to fill in some big areas here and connect the lines, I'm going to drag and drop the color to quickly fill in. And if I still have that set on reference, it's going to fill in everything, which I do not want. So I need to make sure that I've got that turned off. You see here, I'm going to twist and turn around the canvas so I can do some curves here a little bit more naturally. It's the way that my arm works the most comfortably here. I've talked about in previous videos, really finding that comfort zone with how your arm naturally wants to curve and react to the lines. See, as I'm going down, just following the basic shapes and curves of those lines that I've got from the inks layer. Just making sure it looks natural as it curves around. And then as I get areas filled in, dragging and dropping and making sure that those are connected. Just kind of building up as I go down. Once I get a bigger area here, I can start to pull around this and get connected at the top. Once again, we've got reference turned off. So as long as I don't have any gaps in any of these shapes, if I drag and drop this in, it'll just fill in those areas that I colored in. If it's filling in your entire owl here, 2 issues. You could have gaps in your lines, or you've got reference still turned on. So if that's the case, check for reference. If you've got that turned off and you verified that and you've still got the big area being filled in, that just means that you've got some gaps in some of those lines. All right. And now that I've got a pretty big area of the different colors filled in, let's get this darker one here of the eyebrows filled in. This is where I'll get a large portion filled in, so then I can adjust the opacity of the shadows. And once I've got that done, then I can kind of see how it looks between the different colors. You know, a certain percentage on one color might look good and it looks too dark on another color. So I'll have to adjust, and making sure that we've got multiple areas filled in, multiple colors filled in. It can help you better kind of judge what that percentage needs to be. Okay. So now that we've got that, back up to our layers menu, N for blend mode, dropping this down. And I'm thinking pretty dark with this is probably going to be the best. I'm usually, previous videos, usually in the 30s, but I think here, probably in the 40s looks pretty good using this color. All right. So now we can kind of continue on here, zooming in so we can see a little bit better. We'll pull the side of the beak there, underneath the beak, and on this back side. Same thing here, just kind of pulling that up on that right side, erasing any overlaps there. Go ahead and kind of pull one down here underneath that bag of the eye, or that crease, whatever you want to call it. Making sure that those connect there at the top. Pull another shadow here inside this eye. Once I connect, I can drag and drop. Pull them back. And then maybe on the sides here where these overlap. Pull some there. Underneath the wings here. Like so. And then down here underneath the feathers at the bottom. This will take a little bit more time because there's more of them, and of course we did the symmetry here, but I want the shadows to fall a little bit more here towards the bottom right, obviously. So if we do symmetry, then that's not going to fall the same way. It's going to be on the bottom right here on the right hand or the left hand side, but then on the left hand side it's going to be on the bottom left. So we need to do this manually by hand. If I was doing this for a personal job, I would probably take longer doing these shadows and make them a little bit nicer here on the ends, the way that everything matches up. But I don't want to spend too much time on that because it's a little bit boring to watch, I know. So you might take a little bit more time just to make sure that those are a little bit better as far as lined up. I'm going to remove this shadow and how it hits that feather right there. I don't really like that coming over like that. that looks a little bit more natural. Okay, anything else? I think probably a little bit of shadow here underneath this one, this eyebrow here. That's going to give off a shadow there. And probably here, just some, since we have those lines coming up, just some shadows there. You can even pull in some extra tapered lines like that to just add in a little bit more detail. All right, I think that looks good. So the shadows are done. The only thing here I've talked about before is when you have a huge shadowed area like this, you really kind of lose the effect that the shadow gives, just because there's not another hue bouncing up against that, so you don't get that harsh separation. So what I like to do then is I like to come in with my eraser and just kind of pull away a little bit of that shadow. So we've got those two hues now next to each other, and it is very apparent. Okay, yeah, that is a shadow because I can see there's that other color right next to it. So it helps just to kind of pull that out a little bit. We'll do the same thing here on this. We'll pull a little bit of a rim light here on that curve, a little bit on the back too. And I think that looks just a little bit nicer. Okay, so there we go. Shadows are done. Let's go ahead and move on to the highlights now. Same technique here. A new layer on top of the shadows. We're going to tap that, set that as clipping mask. Whoops. Set that as clipping mask. You'll see both of these now clip to the layer that we have for the base color. Got this kind of off-white color here for the highlights. And we'll just, once again, follow this around, just like we did with the shadows. Top left-hand corner, though, being the difference here, where that's coming in from. Erase any overlaps, and then we can even do some round circular highlights here, or oval highlights. Pull in one here at the top. This to kind of taper in. I don't want it too far back because you're actually going to have a little bit of a shadow there. So I want that on the edge there rather than coming down underneath. And then along the top of the beak here, maybe from the bottom, kind of curving around. Once again, we don't want this shadow and the highlight touching though, so you got to be careful there to make sure you break those up before they meet. A little bit of circular highlight there, and then maybe down here on these wings too. Pulling a highlight down here. All right, anything else? I think that's pretty good. Maybe on the top edge, a couple of those on the feet. Pulling back out, you can see what we've got there. I think too on the top of this eyebrow, just a little bit up here on that edge. And we can also pull in some other tapers here. If you want to pull in some more. Kind of flow to that eyebrow hair. Some nice tapered lines there. Okay, so then we're ready to go ahead. Same thing here, just like we did with the shadows. Go up to our layers menu, N for blend mode, and drop that opacity down. And I think with this one going fairly low, 28%, just stopping on there. Looks pretty good. Maybe even hit in here with a couple of oval highlights on the eyes, and maybe even a tapered line there and there inside that eye. There we go. Last but not least, then I'm just going to go ahead, make a new layer down here, sign this guy, and we will be done. 25. I'm getting used to signing it now. So All right, there we go. How to draw an owl for the letter O, the next video in the animal alphabet series. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys like today's video too, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell icon to get notified when I post new videos. And definitely leave a comment below. We've got P through Z still left, so if you've got a suggestion for an animal that you want to see for one of those letters, definitely let me know down there. And if you guys follow along with any of these tutorials, make a design based on one of the videos by watching it. Definitely feel free to share it online if you're on social media. Post it there and tag me at BJDell. I love to see what you guys come up with by following along to these. So once again, thanks so much. And as for me, I can be found online as well as social media on my website, bjdell.com. And that's it for another Animal Alphabet video. Until next time, keep creating.